Hey guys, Chad Trofgruben here. Welcome back to the Steve and the Alien tutorial series. For the start of this new lesson, we'll be focusing on the animation aspects of the exterior shots for the project. And to get started, we'll do the first shot of the entire animation, which involves the van flying over the hill and landing on the road and driving towards the screen. So to get started, you'll need to open up the angle shot that you made for your exterior, and it will look similar to what I have on my screen right here. Once you have done that, you will want to go to File, Save As, and save this project to be a different file name. And the reason for this is so that you don't, let's say, for instance, when you're animating, you do some adjustments to the road, but then you realize that you really didn't want to do that. You can always open up your original file and revert back to your original design. So once you have that scene open, we'll want to import the van angle front view into the project. So go to File, Import, Anime Studio Object, and then we'll locate the props and find the van file that you made. And then we'll import the front angle view of the van. And now we have it in view. So now, again, what we want to do is we want the van to start down here, fly up, land, and then drive this way. But first, let's do a camera pan leading up to that animation. I do a lot of camera pans and movements in my cartoons, and that's something you don't have to do. I just think it adds a little bit more of a cinematic look to it. So what I want to do is just nudge the scene over and then pan over to this part of the road so we can see that come into view. Now, you may need to extend some of your assets to do this. Like, for instance, you have the ground over here, the road, and so on. You may need to extend these out further like this, just so that you have some room to pan with. So once you have done that, what we'll do is take the track camera tool and then page over to frame 1 on the animation. And then we can click down to create a keyframe for that track camera tool. And we can nudge the camera over like this. And now I'll start with a few seconds of this shot. So I can page about 3 seconds in. And I can always trim this when I edit the video. I might not actually have the full 3 seconds in there, but it gives me room to work with. Then I will add a keyframe by simply clicking down on the mouse button. That will then add a keyframe. And then I will page forward about 2 seconds. And then just take the scene and drag it over like this until you can see most of the road from this shot right here. So if I page back to the timeline, we can see what this looks like. And it just goes over like that. Now there are different types of tweens you can do. I'm going to stick with the ease in and ease out tween for right now because I like how it starts slow, speeds up, and slows down. I like that type of movement. But we can adjust how that moves if we wish, by right-clicking and choosing linear to create just a constant straight movement. And we'll be working with that a little later on when we do some other animations. But for right now, I think I'll leave it at smooth. Next, we want to bring the van into play now. Because we have the camera pan over, now we want the van to leap and hit the road. So at frame 120, or 5 seconds in, we will grab the van angle layer and just bring it over like this. So that's positioned. Now we're going to want to shrink this as well because it's further in the distance. So I can take the scale layer tool and just put it down about like this. Now we may need to correct this or resize it as we move forward with the lesson, but we'll start with this and see how it works. And we also want to angle the van a little bit because it's flying up and then landing down. So I'll take the rotate layer tool and tweak it so it's about like that. So now we'll get it close to about here. And you'll notice that it's going to be overlapping the ground, and that's okay. We'll be working with that in a little bit here. We'll just page forward a few frames to about 132. And then let's move the van up like this. And we can, at that point, then take the rotate tool and move it about like this. So we have the van fly up, and then we're going to have it land. And it might be a little bit too drastic the way I have the rotation coming into play. It looks like it might be a little bit too extreme. So I can maybe just back it off a little bit like this. And I might also want to speed the animation up slightly. And I can do so by highlighting these two keyframes, because these are the two keyframes that are right now controlling this whole thing, and just nudging it back a bit. That will speed up the process. Let's try that. And now we'll have the van land. So we'll come right about here, just a few more frames up. And then I can just rotate down so that it's lined up with the road, and then move it down like so. So we have it fly up, land, and now we want it to drive. So we can just page forward to about 168, and then move the van forward like this. Now, of course, as I said, we need to adjust the size of this. This whole time, as it's coming up, down, and moving, it's going to be getting closer and closer and closer to the screen. So at 168, what we can do here is scale the layer and just increase the size. You can move it up so that it matches the road, and move it off the screen so that it drives off the screen. Then we can page through and see how this looks. And it looks like it's kind of going off the road a little bit. I might have it a little bit too big, actually. So I can just scale it down a little bit. Like so. And we can even adjust this a bit like that. And we can also maybe adjust where he lands as well. Because he flies up and then he lands. We can probably have him land right about here. And that'll help with how he moves as well. And there we go. That looks better. And one more thing. Remember I was talking about the linear and smooth options for tweening. We will want from this keyframe at 134 to 168 to be a linear keyframe, because you don't want him to go and then slow down, as you can see, as he gets towards the end of that keyframe, because he's driving a car and he's not going to be slowing down anytime soon because he's trying to escape. So that can very easily be corrected, again, by selecting your keyframe for your movement and choosing linear. So now he just drives and he keeps driving. Now it looks kind of slow when we do this. Well, at least it did when I was paging through. It might be okay, actually, when I look at it, when I play it like that. But again, at any time, if you think it's too slow, too fast, you can move your keyframes back to speed it up, or move them forward to slow it down. Now we need to adjust the van. So when it comes over this hill, we don't have it intersecting with this portion of the land. We want it to be behind this up until it lands right here. Then we want it to be in front of this. So in order to correct that, we are going to duplicate this layer. So what we'll do is we'll use both layers that are now keyed with the same animation, and we'll hide a certain layer during part of the animation and hide the other layer during the other part of the animation. So I will demonstrate what I mean by this. Before you do this, make sure that you have the entire animation laid out the way you want it, so that the van drives the speed that you want it and that everything looks good there. So once you've done that, we will duplicate this layer. So just click on your van and hit duplicate, and then we can have van angle 2. You can rename it something else if you wish. And we will put van angle 2 below the ground layer. So now, going back to frame 1, I will double click on the van angle layer that's above all the rest of the layers. And I'll choose Allow Animated Layer Effects. And I will deselect Visible. And click OK. You'll notice now when you are selected on this layer that your timeline becomes red. That means that this layer is currently not visible. So let's play this through up until we get to frame 3. You'll see that when we pan over, the van is now behind the road and it flies up. But now when it starts to land, it's still behind. This is where we need to adjust the other parts of our visibility for these layers. So right about here, I would say, we will double click on the top van angle layer again, and we will make that visible. And click OK. It is now visible, and it hits the ground, and it goes. Now, you could hide the layer, the second van layer that's underneath. You can't see it right now because we are duplicating the animation exactly the same for each of those layers. So it's just simply underneath that van, and you can't see it. But if you wish, when we do bring the van that's on top back into visible mode, we can also do the same by double-clicking on that bottom van and just choosing Allow Animated Layer Effects and deselect Visible and click OK. So now you don't have to worry about that, especially in the event if you accidentally nudged one of the animations and they're not exactly lined up. And again, you can always revert back and delete one of the layers and just duplicate the layer again if you're having troubles with that. But that is one way to fix it as well. So just one more time, I'll just go to frame 2 and hit play, pan over, see the van come up and drive. Okay, and I kind of noticed that my van, maybe it could speed up a little bit on that last part. So I'll try nudging it back to about 156 and seeing how that plays out. Maybe a little bit too fast. I'll put it to about 162. That's better. Okay. And again, those are things you can adjust on your own depending on how you have your animation set up. Now finally, you'll notice that on the timeline we have an indicator here that says frame, well for me it's frame 181 because that's the current frame my marker is on, of 192. The 192 part is important because if this number is less than that of the total number of frames you have your animation set to, then you won't get your whole animation completed when you export it out. So let's say my animation essentially ends at 162. Well, let's say it went to 210. Well, since the animation ends at 192, you wouldn't see those last few frames of animation play out. So make sure that you extend this out enough so that you get the whole animation in play. And I usually like to leave about 1 second of animation at the end just to have a buffer when video editing. So even though my animation ends at 162, I'll leave the 192 mark as the end of it. So when I export the video, I'll have that 1 second of animation at the end. That's just still. Just kind of like how I did with the beginning when I left a couple of seconds of animation available at the start. But now, once you have completed your animation and you are ready to go, first, make sure you go to File and Save to save your project. And now you want to export this out as a video. You have now completed your first shot, and we're going to use this shot and compile it with all of our other shots when we are all done with the animations. So go to File, Export Animation. You now have a dialog box that gives you a bunch of information. First, make sure that you start on frame 1 and you end on the frame that you specified just a second ago, as I was explaining on the timeline. And for the most part, you shouldn't have to deal with the render quality. Just make sure that it's not at render at half dimensions or render at half frame rate, because you want this to look the best possible when you are exporting this out. And also make sure you have anti-aliased edges, the apply shape effects, apply layer effects, extra smooth images, and enable threaded rendering. That will speed up the process. As for your output format, I like to use QuickTime. And this is a personal preference because it seems to work better. So if you have the option, choose QuickTime. If not, you can choose AVI Movie and go OK. And then you can just specify where you want this to go. And now for your compression type, especially if you're on QuickTime, you'll have access to a few different ones. I sometimes use animation. Actually, I should say I mostly use animation as a compression type, but that is up to you as far as how you want to proceed with that. Sometimes animation doesn't work the best. Sometimes I use something else if the compression doesn't work quite right, but for the most part, I use animation. Make sure that your quality is set to best, and that your frames per second is set to what you have for your stage. And again, way back in the first lesson, I recommended that you have 24 frames. So that's what I have. And once you do that, you click OK, and it will start rendering. And I won't go over these steps each time when we do these shots from here on out. I'm showing you just this one time so that you can use that as the default settings for your future shots. But anyway, that wraps this up. This will render out, and when it's done, you can preview it, and then you can go back in and make any tweaks if you need to. Next time, we'll be focusing on another exterior shot for the animation. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.